14 men crossed Spruce Mountain in McDowell County, West Virginia, on the morning of October 3, 1904. They were a logging crew contracted to the Timbermen's Alliance operation at the base of the eastern slope, experienced men, most of them, who had worked the Appalachian Highland timber country for years and who had been assigned the upper ridge section precisely because it required the kind of skill and comfort with exposed high-elevation terrain that a green crew would not have had. The foreman's name was Calvin Ard. He was 37 years old. He had logged the West Virginia highlands for 15 years. He knew Spruce Mountain specifically. He had worked a section of the lower ridge 2 seasons prior and had been recommended for the upper ridge assignment by the operations superintendent on the basis of that experience. He was, by every available account, the right man for the assignment. 3 of the 14 men who crossed the ridge came back. Ard was one of the 3. The other 2 were a pair of brothers named Doyle, Hugh, and Barnett, who had worked with Ard for 6 years and who were brought down off the mountain on October 8th, 5 days after the crew had made their crossing, by a search party that had been organized when the crew failed to make their scheduled supply contact at the base camp. The search party found Ard and the Doyle brothers at the edge of the tree line on the eastern face, in a condition that the search party leader, a man named Gus Farley, who wrote a detailed account of the recovery and donated it to the McDowell County Historical Society in 1931, described as unlike anything I had seen in 30 years of working these mountains. The 11 men who did not come back were never found. What the investigation conducted by the Timbermen's Alliance, the McDowell County Sheriff, and eventually a State Labor Bureau representative produced, and what the sealed section of the State Bureau's file, unsealed in 1963 as part of a West Virginia records reclassification, adds to what was publicly known, is the subject of this account. Before we begin, drop your location in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. 14 men crossed a ridge on a clear October morning. 3 came back 5 days later. 11 were never found. I want to know where you are sitting when you hear what Calvin Ard told the sheriff about what happened in the camp on Spruce Mountain. McDowell County, West Virginia, in 1904 was in the middle of its coal and timber extraction period, a county whose natural resources had attracted the outside capital and outside labor that transformed the Appalachian Highlands from a subsistence agricultural economy into an industrial one in the space of a single generation. The logging operations in the elevated sections of McDowell County were among the most demanding in the state, operating in terrain that combined high elevation, exposed ridgelines, dense spruce and hemlock forest, and weather conditions that could shift from the ordinary rigors of October into the life-threatening conditions of an early winter storm within hours. Men who worked the upper ridge sections were paid at a premium that acknowledged the premium risk. They were also men for whom the premium was sufficient motivation to accept conditions that a more cautious workforce would have rejected, and the operations understood this and calibrated their assignments accordingly. The upper ridge section of Spruce Mountain had been identified by the Timbermen's Alliance survey the previous spring as containing a stand of mature spruce timber that justified the risk and expense of a 14-man high-elevation crew. The economics worked. The crew crossed the ridge on October 3, 1904. The logging operation context is worth establishing before moving into Ard's account, because context shapes how the account is heard. The Timbermen's Alliance crews that worked the upper ridges of McDowell County in the early 1900s were not casual laborers. They were skilled men in a specialized and physically demanding trade that required, among other things, the ability to assess timber on steep exposed terrain, to fall trees in conditions where a mistake in angle or timing could send a 200-year-old spruce rolling down a slope into the men below, and to work in weather conditions that the lower valleys would not have called acceptable work conditions at all. These were men who were comfortable in the highland forest in a way that most people are not comfortable anywhere. The Spruce Mountain assignment was high-elevation work. The upper ridge section sat above 4,000 feet in the zone where the spruce hemlock forest that had been the target of the Alliance's survey gave way to the more exposed terrain near the ridge spine. But it was within the range of what the crew had done before. Ard's assignment to lead the crew was based on his specific familiarity with the terrain. This matters because it shapes the meaning of what he said to Willis in the sheriff's office on October 9th. He was not a man who frightened easily. He was not a man unfamiliar with the specific terrain he was describing. When a man with 15 years of experience in that forest says he does not know what is on a ridge and he is not going back up it, the weight of that statement is different than if it had come from someone who had never been above the tree line in his life. Calvin Ard gave his first account of what happened to the McDowell County Sheriff Harlan Willis on October 9, 1904, the day after the search party brought him and the Doyle brothers off the mountain. He was, by Farley's account and by Willis's own notes, physically depleted in a way that went beyond what 5 days of exposure in October highland conditions would typically produce. Thin, cold, with eyes that Willis described in his case notes as not seeing the room the way a man's eyes see a room when he is present in it. He gave his account in a flat, careful voice that Willis noted seemed disconnected from the content of what he was describing. He spoke for approximately 40 minutes. Willis took notes. The notes are in the McDowell County Courthouse records in Welch. They have been there since 1904. Ard's account begins with the crossing and the establishment of the base camp in the Upper Ridge section on the afternoon of October 3rd. He describes the first day and a half of work as ordinary. The crew felling and limbing in the designated section, the work progressing on schedule, the weather clear and cold with the normal conditions of a West Virginia highland October. The first indication that something was wrong, by his account, was the evening of October 4th, the second night in the camp. He describes a sound. He's careful about this in Willis's notes, careful in a way that Willis noted specifically, writing in the margin beside this section of his account. He was choosing his words, the way a man chooses words when he is afraid of not being believed. The sound, as Ard described it, was not a wind sound, not an animal sound, not any sound he had a name for from 15 years of working the highland forest. It came from below the camp, from the downslope section of the ridge they had not yet worked. It continued intermittently through the night. The crew heard it. Nobody went to look. On the morning of October 5th, the crew went to work as scheduled. Ard describes the morning's work without particular incident. At midday, 2 men, he gives their names in his account, names that are in Willis's notes, went into the unworked downslope section to assess the timber stand there in advance of the next phase of the operation. They did not return for the midday meal. Ard went looking for them in the early afternoon and found no trace of either man in the downslope section or on the surrounding terrain. He noted this and told the crew to remain in the main camp. At nightfall, the 2 men had not returned. The sound from the night before resumed. Ard's account of October 6th is the part that Willis underlined in his notes, twice, with the notation in the margin that reads simply, "He believes this." On the morning of October 6th, 4 more men were gone from the camp. They had been present at the previous evening's meal. They were absent when Ard woke before dawn and accounted for the crew. No one had heard them leave. Their equipment was in the camp. Their food was in the camp. Their personal effects were in the camp. They were not. By the morning of October 7th, by Ard's account, 8 men were gone. He and the Doyle brothers and 3 other men remained. The 3 other men left the camp on the afternoon of October 7th. Against Ard's explicit instruction, they told him they were going for help and did not return, and were not among the 3 who came back. Ard and the Doyle brothers remained in the camp through the night of October 7th and moved down the eastern face at first light on October 8th, staying together, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed, until Farley's search party encountered them at the tree line. Ard could not explain, in his October 9th account, what had happened to the 11 men. He said he did not know. He said he had not seen any of them leave the camp or the camping area. He said the downslope section of the ridge where the first 2 had gone to assess the timber was a section he had not entered after they failed to return, and that he could not say what was in it. He said the sound had continued on each of the 4 nights in the camp and had stopped when he and the Doyle brothers began their descent. He said he did not know what had made the sound. He did not speculate about the 11 men. He answered Willis's questions in the flat, careful voice that Willis had noted at the beginning of the interview, and when Willis had run out of questions, Ard sat in the chair across from the sheriff's desk for a long moment before saying, "I do not know what is on that ridge. I know I am not going back up it." He never did. He left McDowell County within 3 weeks of the interview and did not return. He appears in the 1910 census in Mingo County, West Virginia, listed as a carpenter. He appears in the 1920 census in Logan County, listed as a laborer. He does not appear in any subsequent census. His death date and location are unknown. The two Doyle brothers, Hugh and Barnett, were interviewed separately by Willis on October 10th and 11th, the day and day after Ard's interview. Their accounts are in the McDowell County Courthouse records, alongside Ard's in Willis's notes. Both accounts confirm the broad arc of what Ard described: the crossing and camp establishment, the first night's sound, the gradual disappearance of crew members across October 5th, 6th, and 7th, the decision to descend. Both accounts are shorter than Ard's, and both are, in Willis's assessment, more guarded. The brothers answered specific questions, but did not volunteer the same level of detail that Ard had provided without prompting. Hugh Doyle, when asked about the sound, said he had heard it and could not describe it, and that he would not try. Barnett Doyle, when asked the same question, said, "There are things you hear in the mountains that you have names for, and things you don't. I don't have a name for what I heard on that ridge." Neither brother provided any additional information about the disappearances beyond what Ard had described. Neither brother returned to McDowell County's High Ridge country after October 1904. Both appear in the 1910 census in Logan County, West Virginia, in occupations unrelated to logging. The State Labor Bureau representative who visited McDowell County in November 1904 to assess the Spruce Mountain incident produced a report that was filed in the Standard Labor Bureau records in Charleston and subsequently sealed as part of the same 1904-1912 period of administrative discretion that affected several West Virginia mining and timber investigations. The unsealed version, available since 1963, adds one element to the official account that the sheriff's report and the Timbermen's Alliance investigation do not contain. The Bureau representative had, as part of his investigation, climbed to the upper ridge section of Spruce Mountain with a 4-man team in late October 1904, 3 weeks after the incident. He found the camp still standing, as the 3 survivors had left it. He found the equipment, the food stores, the personal effects of the 11 missing men, all present and undisturbed. He found, in the downslope section of the ridge where the first 2 men had gone on October 5th, a section of terrain that he described in his report as showing evidence of disturbance that is not consistent with the normal passage of men or animals through highland forest. He does not describe the disturbance further in the report. He notes it and moves on to the next section of his findings and does not return to it. His recommendations in the report are standard: improved safety protocols for high-elevation logging crews, mandatory supply contact schedules, emergency equipment requirements. The recommendations address the operational failures that had allowed a 14-man crew to be isolated for 5 days without contact. They do not address what had isolated them. The 11 men who never came back are listed in the report as missing, presumed dead, cause undetermined. They are still listed that way in every official record that addresses the Spruce Mountain incident. They have been listed that way since November 1904. Today, the upper ridge section of Spruce Mountain in McDowell County is within the Monongahela National Forest. The area where the logging camp stood in October 1904 is not marked on any trail map and is not accessible by any designated route. A backcountry permit system governs access to the high ridge sections of Spruce Mountain. The permits are issued by the Forest Service District Office in Parsons. They are available, and the area is not formally closed. The downslope section of the ridge where the first 2 men went on October 5, 1904, is also not marked, not designated, and not formally closed. Gus Farley's account, donated to the McDowell County Historical Society in 1931, contains one detail that does not appear in the official records and that has not been cited in any subsequent account of the Spruce Mountain incident. After describing the physical condition of the 3 survivors and the descent from the mountain, Farley wrote, "When we were coming down the eastern face and were about half a mile from the tree line, Calvin Ard stopped walking and looked back up the slope for a long time. I asked him what he was looking at. He said nothing for a while. Then he said, 'Whatever is up there knows we are leaving.' I told him to keep moving. He did. but I looked back up the slope myself after he said it, and I have thought about what I saw, or thought I saw, in the upper tree line for the 27 years since that morning. I am not going to write what I thought I saw. I am writing this account because the men who did not come back deserve to have the record exist. But the thing in the tree line is mine to keep, and I am going to keep it. He did keep it. The account ends there, with that paragraph, and Farley died in 1939, and the thing in the tree line died with him. What the McDowell County Historical Society has is the account up to and including that paragraph, and then the end of the document, and the 11 names of the men who did not come back, which Farley included at the end as a list, without comment, as the last thing in the account. Here is the question that Spruce Mountain leaves behind, and it has two versions that require different kinds of honesty to hold. The first version: 11 men died on a West Virginia highland ridge in October 1904. They died of exposure or of accidents in difficult terrain, or in some combination of circumstances that the search parties were not equipped to fully investigate in the season available to them. Their bodies were never recovered because high-elevation terrain in late autumn-winter conditions is unforgiving and unpredictable, and because the search effort was limited by resources and season. Calvin Ard's account describes a traumatized man's experience of 5 days of progressive loss, shaped by the terrain and the cold and the death of people he had known for years, into something that felt, to the person experiencing it, like more than a series of accidents. The sound he described was wind, or animals, or the acoustic properties of a specific ridge configuration. The disturbance the Bureau representative found in the downslope section was erosion, or animal activity, or something entirely explicable that he chose not to describe because describing it would have required him to explain it, and he could not. The second version is the one that Calvin Ard's account, read in full, points toward. 11 men, most of them experienced in this terrain, gone from a camp in circumstances that the one man who survived and could speak about it described as having no explanation he could provide. An upslope sound for 4 nights that none of the 14 men had a name for. A downslope section of ridge that 2 men entered on October 5th, and that 10 years later a state investigator found showing disturbance he would not describe. The camp undisturbed 3 weeks later, everything in place, waiting. Which version do you believe? Tell me in the comments. Tell me which one Gus Farley believed when he brought Calvin Ard and the Doyle brothers off the mountain. Tell me which one Willis believed when he wrote "he believes this" in the margin of his notes. If these sealed investigation files and lost logging camps and the accounts of men who came back when the others did not are the reason you found this channel, subscribe and ring the bell. Spruce Mountain is still there. The Monongahela National Forest issues permits for the high ridge sections. You can go up there. 14 men crossed the ridge on October 3, 1904. The Alliance's supply contact schedule would not have flagged their absence for 4 more days. By the time the search party reached them, 3 men remained. 14 men crossed the ridge in 1904. 3 came back. The 11 who did not come back have never been found. Their names are in Gus Farley's account, listed without comment at the end of the document, the last thing he wrote before setting down his pen. They were experienced men who knew the work and knew the terrain, and had been sent into it by an operation that was comfortable sending experienced men into the West Virginia highlands in early October, because experienced men in early October was the formula that had worked before. The formula did not work on Spruce Mountain in October 1904, and the official record has never established why. And the downslope section of the ridge has been sitting inside the Monongahela National Forest for 120 years without an examination that would establish what the State Bureau representative found there and would not describe. The ridge is still there. The permits are available from the Parsons District Office. You can go up there. Calvin Ard went up there on October 3, 1904, and came back on October 8th, and never went back. And the thing that Gus Farley saw in the tree line on the morning of the descent is the last image in this account, because it is also the last image in Farley's. And he carried it for 27 years and then took it with him, and the record carries only its outline, and the outline is enough to close this account. 11 men, Spruce Mountain, McDowell County, West Virginia, October 1904. The permits for the high ridge sections of Spruce Mountain are available at the Parsons District Office. The record is what it is, and it ends here.